Hey everyone, today I'm here with Noemi Ceapa. We're going to be talking about personal versus business branding throughout the life cycle of a small business. And we're going to get things started right away.
I'm David C. Barnett, and you're tuned in to Small Business and Deal Making, the podcast, YouTube channel, and blog where I talk about buying, selling, financing, and managing small and medium sized businesses while controlling risk. So, if you're looking to take control of your future through buying a business one day, or if you already own a business and you're looking to grow or exit, you've come to the right place. I talk about interesting things, I talk to interesting people, and I answer your questions every week right here. So, be sure to hit like and be sure to hit subscribe, and let's get to it. Are you thinking of growing your business or beginning a journey into entrepreneurship? Take a shortcut to success by buying an existing and profitable business the right way. Visit businessbuyeradvantage.com and learn more about my online training, group coaching, and consulting services designed to help you win.
And welcome. So, today I've got a very special guest. And we had a great conversation about personal and business branding. And I thought at the time, hey, it would be great to have you come on the show. Why don't we get things started by having you give us a brief background about yourself and how you got into business, the type of work you've done over the course of your career, and what has brought you into the space of helping people with their branding.
Yeah, sounds great. And hi, everyone. Excited to spend this time with you together. I'm Noemi. I'm the founder of the Consulting Studio. I'm an entrepreneur, speaker, branding expert, and branding coach. So, personal branding and business branding. And I spent years working behind the scenes with million-dollar companies, really learning what actually makes people buy and why. Like, not the theory, but the reality. So, a lot of entrepreneurs, particularly new ones, they struggle to stand out. They think, I need a better logo, I need a better website, I need more followers. But after a decade really working behind the scenes with companies like Coca Cola, Colgate, Blue Cross Blue Shield, I learned the problem isn't really the logo or the website. It's deeper than that. It's more foundational. It's the messaging and how you position yourself. And most people don't really know the difference. So I help women that are new to business cut through the noise and build a brand around a unique message, being able to demonstrate that credibility, that expertise in a way that really connects with the people that you're trying to reach and it translates to revenue. So my bigger game is to help women becoming recognized in their space, whether that expertise is about opening doors, shaping conversations, to where the business becomes really the obvious choice for your clients and partners that you want to work with.
Okay, because when we do think of branding, we think of things like Coca Cola. We think and when we come to the world of small business, when we come to the world of small business, a lot of people are initially torn between, do I put my name on my business or do I try to create some kind of brand that I can use for, like Coca-Cola, for example. And so, let's talk about this with respect to the life cycle of a business, because when people are first starting out, what typically do you see people doing and what really should they be thinking about?
The early stages is looking at that foundation and solidify it before you jump into, I know it's all the sexy things of let's do an ad, the website, the funnels, all those amazing things. But if you cannot clearly explain what you do in a way, it's like, who do you help? What problem do you solve? Why you? Why should your customers or your audience care? If you don't have that clearly defined and be able to explain it in a way that resonates and connects with people, everything else you put on top of it that you're trying to scale the message is noise right now. So that foundation is what most people try and skip ahead because we want to feel like, we're making progress, um, we're thinking in speed and results, but that's really what will slow you down in the longer run in terms of getting your business off the ground is the clarity of your message. Can you clearly explain to your audience who you help, how you help them, what problem you solve, and then why should they care? Why should they choose you?
Okay. So So can you give us some examples maybe of some people who've been starting out that you've worked with and some of the challenges they've faced and why you've led them down one direction or another?
Absolutely. So one of my clients actually has an e-commerce business around fashion, and that's one of the industries that is a great example. It's so commoditized. It's such a crowded space. So how do you cut through? We don't need, right, another clothing brand. We need something better. We need something different. So he had a really extraordinary story that was he wanted to embed into the brand but didn't know how to articulate it. So how do I take something that is personal experience and make it relevant, make it engaging, make it compelling to thousands of strangers online that have never met me, don't really care. So how does that connect to a piece of clothing and giving people a reason to want to buy and wear? So at the time that we met, he didn't know how to introduce himself at networking events or what to articulate on the website, what to put into a newsletter. Like, literally, how do you build relationships with people online based on your business idea, right? It is yours, it is in your mind, but how do you take that and extract it and make it meaningful to your audience? So, after working together for some time, really, it was amazing to see that transition in terms of when you have that clarity, he was able to go into networking events and attract partnerships, including with like former NBA players, to go from I don't know what I do or how to make it count for a stranger to I can get a stranger to become invested in my mission because I'm building towards something bigger. Now, I realize not every business is centered around a story. So, this is just one example. It can be much more technical. We can be centered around features, benefits, very different reasons to buy. But ultimately, is can you give people a reason to buy? And that is really what I help founders transform from. I know I have value, but I don't know how to explain it through my product or service. To this is how I stand out, and this is why you should care or become part of our, our community, our tribe of customers.
How should people think about the question of putting, my name on the business versus trying to create that business brand that's separate from the individual? Especially in the beginning, a lot of the times when people are starting off, they have a very small number of employees, or it's just them kicking things off. And a lot of people, especially if they've been tuned into channels like mine, they realize, hey, if I ever want to grow this one day and sell it, having my name on the front door, so to speak, can be an impediment to making a transaction happen. But in the beginning, people really are doing business with that person. Um, what kinds of things should people be thinking about when they make that decision? Because it can feel like a commitment, when you get things started, like, "I'm going to do it this way," because, maybe they make the decision based on what's easiest in the moment. Um, but, what other things should they be thinking about as far as the long term?
Great question, and I'll answer it in two ways. First, if your business has a geographic limitation, like you can only work within 50, 100 miles or less, then this is not something you should worry about. And we're not talking about personal branding at scale. Now, whether you want to put your name and face on the actual business, it's not a necessity. At most of the time, we're talking about really the sheer value of just the product or service itself, and it does not really depend on you. In the second case, if you have a product or service based business that can reach potentially nationwide, that's where the conversation becomes more interesting. And for a small business owner in that case, the two are really inseparable at the start. The founder is the brand. Trying to separate them too early can create distance between what makes you credible. So you will be the face of that business in public appearances, on social media, and also people buy into the person more than the business at first until they both build that credibility and reputation. But um, really, when you're the founder, your personal credibility is your business credibility at first. So especially if you are a service-based business where the service itself depends on you and comes from like your expertise, whether it's personal or professional, or if the product, like in the example we just mentioned, is based on a story that's linked to you and your expertise. In those cases, you do want to consider that really thoughtfully as to not making the business entirely dependent on you, and to start setting it up in a way that, and I think we're going to get into this more as we go into the life cycle and the business
Yeah.
scales, is you want to start thinking of transferring, if it's that intellectual property in a service-based business, start transferring that into systems. That is where that distinction of it cannot always depend on me comes in. And in a case of a product-based, Sarah Blakely, for example, comes to mind, right? The two were interconnected, intertwined for such a long period of time, but the brand continues on after she has sold it because the product now speaks for itself and stands on its own ground. But at first, it was borrowing that credibility from her, and they were both evolving and building simultaneously.
What, you know, as things start to grow and your business starts to get bigger, are there any cues or things that you can notice in a business that kind of indicates that it's time to maybe start to focus on trying to move away from that personal brand that you might have relied upon in the beginning?
Oh, especially in a service-based business, when the founder becomes a bottleneck, that is a critical point. When you have hit the limit of what your schedule can accommodate and how many customers are raising their hand to work with you, that is
Mhm.
where that transference really needs to be accelerated if it has not been begun previously, to transfer that intellectual property, those methodologies, frameworks, knowledge, way of providing the service into real frameworks and methods that a team can execute and implement and support those customers at that same level. So if your business at this point depends on your schedule, that is that critical moment where if you have not yet made preparations, you need to start thinking about, how do I transfer my authority, my expertise, my credibility to a team that you publicly empower and position as the trusted partner that will support you. And then the founder can still continue to be available, but in a different context for
Mm.
more higher tier collaborations, partnerships, one on one custom work. And if you are a product based business, in that case, you're really looking at, how do I empower the product beyond me? Looking at also partnerships with other brands, other companies, to where it's not just about my credibility that is lended to the product, but how do I enhance the product to demonstrate quality, to demonstrate high care features, expertise, like whatever the key reasons to buy are, that they're not always linked to you, that it can start to
Yeah.
stand alone on its own territory.
I get this a lot when I'm talking with business owners who have been the front and center face of their business for a long time, and they struggle to see how they're going to do this separation from being that contact person, for example, with the big clients or what have you. I always use the example of like Tony Robbins, like Tony Robbins has built this big company based upon his own personality and the things he's done and his public appearances and all that sort of thing, but nobody today expects to do business with that company and talk to him on the phone, right? Like everyone realizes that, they might listen to him on, an audio file, they might watch him on YouTube or something like this, or read a book of his. But if they interact with his company and get their training, they're not going to be dealing with him. And so then I'll ask the person, you understand this is how it is, and they'll be like, oh, well, yeah, I understand that's how their business is run. And then I'll say, well, here's the challenge: how did he get there? Like, how did he, because at one time when he was starting off, he was the guy who answered the phone and, served all the customers and taught all the classes and all that kind of thing. So there was this migration, and I think when people have an idea of what it might look like when someone has done a transition like this, and again, his company still got his name on it, right? So he hasn't transitioned to a business brand. It's still his name, but he's definitely transitioned through the systematization of what he delivers, like you've just explained. What there's the operational delivery of the product or service, but is there also a way to systematize the brand or the brand voice for all the people that are going to be speaking for the company? How should we think about that? Do we create some kind of persona, sort of playbook that everyone can follow along with?
Absolutely. And that is something you should do well in advance. As soon as there is someone else other than you that is managing website message, brochure message, social media message, as soon as someone else is involved and there is a distance, an obvious distance between you and that person tactically, you should set those foundations into place to have that consistency. This is a rule that big brands never break is they have that clarity and they know we will always be like this, we will never be like this. And a stranger that you onboard onto your team needs to have a single source of truth that everyone can
Mm.
refer to and can work from as a common basis. So really the question you asked should come in well before Tony Robbins was no longer able to pick up the phone himself. It's something you should do as soon as someone else is managing your brand, your business's message.
What does it feel like when people are interacting with a business that doesn't have this put together correctly? Like, just just so we can kind of put ourselves in the shoes of customers, like what would they be feeling?
I love this question, and I started to smile as soon as you asked it because I call it the 51st handshakes. If a customer cannot recognize that something they read in your brochure is the same thing they read on the social media and at your trade show booth, if they cannot tell that that is coming from one company around the same problem, the same person they help, the same solution, the same why care, if they can't tell, then every time they're interacting with you, you are starting at zero trust, zero credibility, zero recognition. And every time they see you, it's like, oh, interesting, nice to meet you. But you don't want that. You want to start a friendship. You want to go on a date. You want to have a relationship, right? In terms of customer and business acquisition, or sorry, business and customer acquisition. So if you always show up in a different tone, in let alone different colors and different visual appearance, but if your voice is different every time, they literally might have the impression they're meeting a different business and it will feel disjointed and your efforts are really very scattered at that point because you cannot rally your audience around a single vision. They do not understand what is in your mind. They just see these scattered efforts. And if you're asking a stranger to put together those type of dots, they don't. So if you don't have clarity and you scale the clarity, and that is what a potential buyer encounters at every touch point with your business, unless you're doing that, you're meeting them 50 times for the first time. And that is so much lost revenue.
So here's what I'm imagining now, based on what you've just said, is that I'm imagining that there's a certain kind of playbook or description that says this is how we behave, this is how we present ourselves publicly. And would it be fair to say you can imagine it kind of like a mask you put on? Like when we're at work here and we're all representing this brand, this is the outward appearance we want to give. Like, so we're gonna put this mask on so that people see us this way. And I'm thinking about, like, certain airlines like to, for example, give the feeling that they have this really happy, fun workplace, and, like, the flight attendants are telling jokes and stuff, and that's obviously part of the brand they're trying to present, right? And, you know, I was at a hotel recently, and it was a one of these fun, hip, kind of newer brands that has just come out, and there are these little messages written everywhere. And in the elevator, there was glass, and there were these little things like, "Be your best self," and all this kind of stuff. And I was looking at that thinking, I bet there's a playbook which has, like, 100 different things to write in the elevator. And, I mean, would that guess be correct likely? Like, because
Yes.
I've stayed in this hotel brand in many places, and it's all got the same vibe to it.
And see if one of those had a different vibe that was very serious, very corporate. Another one had a boring, outdated vibe, right? Then you'd be like, well, what is this like? Now, the first time I'm gonna stay at a hotel, I don't know what I'm gonna get. Which one is it gonna be? It's probably gonna be yet another one. So the answer is yes. You want to define, to your analogy, like, are we wearing a mask? Yes, everyone needs to wear the same mask because you're writing a message for the business, not yourself as the founder or the social media manager. And also a fun nuance. Typically, especially in the early stages of a business, that voice will really come from the founder's personality. It is not something alien. I'm a strong believer that your marketing should sound like you, especially in the early stages. Once you scale past 50 million, 100 million, then it takes on a life of its own, and you want to reconsider this. But in the early stages, it is very much tied to the vision and the personality of the founder. It should feel like one and the same. And then, really, that playbook is, how do I clearly outline this for all the people that are working on my team, the salesperson that represents our customers and our brand at a trade show, and the person picking up the phone when there are issues. And we need to embody those. So everyone needs to wear the same mask. At whatever stage of the message, including customer service, including sales, including marketing, including social media. They all need to wear the same mask, the same color, the same story, and the same vibe. So, yes, that company definitely had a playbook of, these are 100 things that we could say, and these are 100 things we could not say and don't want to.
Yeah. So okay, so the viewers in this show are not in the 50, $100 million category, right? We're very much in the smaller business category. And I can totally get what you're saying about how when a business starts off, it's very much the tonality and vibe of the owner's personality. And when the team is small enough, they probably don't spend a lot of time training this voice. It just kind of rubs off through osmosis, right? And then as we get bigger, like you said, we have to systematize things more. And I guess, is it when, like, at what point does someone actually have to sit down and say, here's the tonality of our brand? Like, and I'm just wondering, like, what does the exercise look like to do that? Like, if I was going to do that for me, what kinds of things would I put on the piece of paper?
Oh, that's a great question, and not one easy to answer in a few seconds. But I can think of two moments that are a great time to do it. One is when you're really scaling the message, so the message
Mhm.
appears in more and more places. At first, it was maybe just the website, and it was just a few people, interacting with that, and then it becomes trade shows, then it becomes local chamber of commerce meetings, it becomes more and more places, more and more eyeballs and strangers interacting with this message. It needs to tell the same story. And when you have more team members that are wearing the message itself. So those, at least one of those would be great moments to have that conversation. We're not talking about huge revenue at this point. We're just really talking about visibility and team size. As soon as you have one other person that is involved in talking about your brand and you are not in that conversation, or even if you are, you should both be saying the same message. In terms of how to go about that exercise, I wish there was an easy way to describe that in just a few moments, but that's typically work that is like, with my clients, it's like a half day workshop where we intentionally want to go and define that. But for a shortcut, I'd encourage you to find I don't want to say celebrities, but like other well known figures or businesses, and literally import examples of, we can accept this. This sounds like something we would also do, to give people a tangible definition. You need a goalpost, something that is outside of just your mind and your personality to rub off of. You want to explain it tangibly. So either grab examples from personalities or other businesses to say, this is a tone of voice that we want to have, that we align with. Let's say Red Bull. That is very unique. Like, you need to know, is that you or is that not you? And grab some examples across the spectrum of, this is very playful, this is very a bit aggressive. Harley Davidson also. That is one category. Disney, very different category.
Yeah.
let's say, I don't know, like BBC or some type of like animal welfare foundation. They all have a certain way. So look for examples around you, either big brands or well-known public figures that everyone can rally around. Oh, I understand, and define that clearly. If it's just even an hour meeting with your staff or with yourself at the end of a long day when you have, half a minute to yourself, is put that out there very tangibly to where it's irrefutable. This is what we stand for. This is what we don't stand for and don't align with. And grab several different examples across a spectrum and bring it home and give it voice and give it concrete shape and form.
So it's almost like, if you choose other brands or characters that your staff may be familiar with, you can kind of say, "We're a little of this and a little of that," and you kind of like a recipe. "Oh, this is what we're looking to blend together." And then you could even give some examples. What I like so much about the hotel I mentioned is that, you know, that's very definitive. They could say, "Here are the messages that we put on our elevator window," and they can actually put that down on paper. Whereas if you were trying to have an organization with multiple locations and you were trying to get everyone to sort of have the same attitude, I think it would be more difficult to kind of transmit that and teach people how to carry that out, wouldn't it?
Yes, and there's actually two things that we're talking about here, and I think we should weave them out. So there's the tone and voice, and how should we sound? That is more on the emotion side of like, right? Harley Davidson and Red Bull generate one type of emotion. Disney very different. So that is really
Yeah.
aimed at a bit of an emotional side of bringing the message together. But there's another component that we touched on early on in our conversation, which is what makes us unique? How do we stand out? Why should customers care? Whether that's features, benefits, a unique advantage we bring to customers' lives, a unique solution. So that is much more on the rational side. And you need to have that one also defined, because you can't base your message only on the, let's call it more fluffy stuff, right? So you need that solid anchor of this is why our product or service is great, why it's better, why it's different, why it's more convenient, cheaper, more premium, in whatever way you are different, to have a clear definition of that alongside with how will we show up, so that when there are multiple locations, multiple team members involved, or you might be sending off your salesperson to have a meeting in another state, that is already a different location, that message can be embodied and live on beyond just our office and
Mm.
um, our small space. It needs to be represented in the same coherent way, at any scale or distance by anyone in the business.
So, we talk here on the channel about buying and selling businesses. And one of the things that I hear sometimes from business owners is they'll talk about the power of their brand and how great their brand is. And they're often trying to create some kind of explanation as to why their business should be sold for more money. And what I usually explain is I say, well, for a brand to be worth more, it means that it has to facilitate a better financial performance because people pay for businesses based on the actual profitability and cash flow that come out of the business. And, the next question is, so buyers will look at a business and they might agree that the branding is great and that's one of the reasons they like it. And there's a certain profitability there and they're willing to pay a certain amount based on that cash flow. But then the next question that the buyer is always going to ask is, will that cash flow continue once I become the owner? And one of the problems that it often is, one of the issues is if the owner is the personality or the brand or whatever of that business, then the buyer is worried that when they buy it, that it won't translate, it won't transfer over. What you're describing, like getting this stuff documented and written down, is part of the solution to this. Is showing someone how they will be able to take over and navigate and carry on that same voice?
Carry on the voice, carry on the unique differentiators, and then carry on what made that business truly valuable. So beyond just the personality, there's always I'm sensing you're talking more like a service-based business. Those frameworks that make that individual, therefore that company valuable, they need to be embedded in real systems, and the team needs to be
Yeah.
able to implement those and carry those even without the founder. So until it's systematized, that's a very valid question. Can it live on without systems? I would be questioning that as well. Once that is systematized and you have already validated the fact that your customers are getting value from working with the team, that everything is embedded and you're buying the machine, you're not buying the mechanic. That is what you, I think that would be a great criteria to assess is when happy customers, how many of the customers actually are happy with the service and are they happy because of what they got, the way the system works, or are they happy because the founder was involved and was shining that light on the entire collaboration?
Mm. So did the systems actually work, or were people just happy because they got attention from the person they assumed was the one who was the best provider or the best, source of knowledge or expertise?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. What are some of the common mistakes or myths that people have around this whole topic that you run into when you're talking with clients?
Can you give me more examples? What do you mean?
Like, do people have certain ideas about branding or believe certain things about it that just are not true that you have to, stop them and say, no, like re-explain how things really work?
Oh, it's usually one of two things. Either we need a better logo, website, something like that, or we need to run more ads. So the power of the brand isn't just because you have a logo or a website does not mean you have a brand. No matter how well those are executed visually, you can absolutely put like ridiculous amounts of money into purely visual branding, and if it does not have an essence and a strong message, it doesn't land. And then same for ads. So you're not looking to getting more eyeballs on something that is unclear cannot
Yeah.
generate reliable revenue for you. So these are some of the most common misconceptions is that, oh yeah, it's just logos and fonts and ours looks good, or it can do it can do a little better visually. Is it can probably do better on clarity. Again, who do you help? What problem do you solve? What makes you unique? These are some of the deeper foundational work that is often, we want to skip ahead and then it slows us down because we have to come back to this in order to say, well, why does this ad not work? These are typically the two most common misconceptions are we need a better logo or we need more ads or more money into ads.
What is, we often hear about someone doing a rebrand. In fact, there were some, famous examples of big public companies that were rebranding recently. And some of the clientele don't like that, and you hear all this stuff on social media. But what could be a sign that maybe somebody should be considering a rebrand? And and you know, what does that entail? Like, I mean, you've talked to us today about the branding is the entire message. It's not just the logo and the colors and all that kind of stuff. Um, how big a challenge is that, and when might it be a wise thing to consider?
There's no cookie cutter answer for this one, but let's just think of a couple of examples. I really love the Cracker Barrel rebrand and how they lost quite a bit of revenue because turns out people were really attached because it conveyed tradition, it conveyed a homey feeling. It's something that people grew up with, and they were really attached to that. That
What
is
was it,
such
the brand they were changing or just the logo?
the logo. So not even
Right.
the colors, but I think it was, part of the person or the barrel actually was modified or one of them was removed, um, and that should be intuitively obvious. This is we could geek out about this, but people are really attached to values, memories, experiences. And it depends if you have like a restaurant-based business where you really that is part of your product is the experience, and that is very
Yeah.
important versus let's say property management business, right? It's much more tangible. It's either you do the work or you don't, and I'm happy with that regardless of your logo. So it's this is not universally true for all companies, but in some cases, customers do become attached to it if it's an entire experience that they're buying into, and there are a lot of memories and emotions involved with that. But in terms of a rebrand, some examples could be when you started your business around one idea, one product service, or one particular strength of that product and service, and then it expands and you add others, and it starts to feel a little bit chaotic, like you've lost the common thread. That is a good moment to pause and not just like visually rebrand. You might not even need a visual rebrand, but a messaging rebrand of what is the connecting line here? Because if it's not clear for you, it won't be clear for your customers either. So there are so many different nuances, or you can outgrow your message also in other ways when you bring in different partnerships and you feel like you're diluting the original starting point. There are a lot of nuances to this, but ultimately, when it's a really good exercise to go and, at least once a year, if you're not doing it more often, go and look back at your website, at your sales brochures, at what are the things that your customers are seeing, and does it feel outdated compared to where you
Yeah.
are going? And there's often a disconnect because the business, as the owner, the business evolves in our mind, but it needs to evolve for the customer visually and then also in the experience they have. So once you've changed that message, your team needs to be able to carry that, and your customer needs to be able to experience that. So is the sales cycle easy? Does the product really feel innovative to them? If that is a key selling point, or that there is less friction. Well, does your customer representative, when they pick up the phone, do you give them less friction? So there's many, it's more like a waterfall effect, is you need to, it really starts in your mind with, okay, the business is evolving. I am sensing it, but I need to translate it tangibly into materials. And then the materials need to also be translated into real customer experiences. It can't just be something pretty that we say, or that we say we stand for, or that it's fun. It needs to go all the way to be embedded into the customer saying, yes, I get this and I like this.
When we are having an issue in the business, let's say we're having sales that are not growing or something like that, how can somebody tell that the problem is the branding? Or is I know this is a tough question, um, like, because there could be all kinds of different problems, but maybe from your own experience, have you seen clear-cut examples of when the brand was the problem?
It can be the problem many times, and we've covered clarity a lot. So is the message clear? If your audience cannot see themselves in your message, they will not buy. I don't care if you have a
Mm,
tech product, an e-commerce product, a service-based business, they need to be able to understand, is this for me or is it not? And you really only have like 2 to 5 seconds on social media or on a website to say, do I want to sign up to this newsletter? Do I want to hit buy? Do I even want to read more actually before I want to hit buy? Do I want to read more? Is this for me or not? So clarity is definitely a key point. Um, there are so many factors that come in here. Often it's also, do you have a sales ecosystem, or is it just buy my product, buy my product, buy my product? So you need, depending on the industry you're in, you need different vehicles to support that message. And it's like create a world that people want to be a part of. Now, if you have a car wash business, that is not necessarily the case. We're talking about services or products that are more easily commoditized. There is more availability, especially online, and it's a more crowded space where you need to really stand out beyond just the tangible product or service itself. So these are some of the things that come to mind. But I'm curious, what have you seen? Because it can definitely be other components of the sales cycle, but it's typically. Do you
Well,
also? Uh,
the,
one
the
more thing I
things
want.
the things I've the things I've seen is that when people are growing quickly and adding a lot of team members, is that they're adding people, but they're not properly onboarding them with respect to the brand and the brand message. So you end up with maybe a very clearly defined brand, and it was working really well, and the message was clear, and the follow-up and the systems and everything were being executed really well. And then you grow your team by 40%, and you bring in a whole bunch of other people, and you don't adequately train them in how what that mask is supposed to look like how they're supposed to sound, how they're supposed to behave, like how they're supposed to be on brand with the message of the business. And that is just one of the growing pains, I guess, of a business expanding. And many small business owners don't think about their brand in the ways that we've talked about it here today, and they don't make the messaging part of the onboarding when they're bringing someone in and training them, which which is one of the reasons why I asked you, like, earlier, so what does it look like if I sat down and I wanted to, like, document or create this? You gave some great ideas about how you could kind of, show examples in other things. And I think for a small business, um, to be able to say we're modeled after these different names that people might recognize, it might be an easy way to kind of give clarity to what you're trying to achieve.
Yes, that is a real tangible challenge when you're bringing in that many new people that quickly, and it can dilute everything that you've built for if they're not able to first really understand the product or service very well, then also understand who you are as a business and what makes you different. And I know if you're hiring that many people that quickly, the last thing you want to hear is slowing down. But creating an onboarding package, even if it's just like a 1 hour material or a half-hour material that sets these clear guidelines into place, it can really help make sure that everyone is rowing in the same boat in the same direction. Because otherwise, if they're all at their own speed, at their own pace, and conveying a different part of that, you might not notice it right away, but over time, if you continue hiring that many people, or even just hanging on to that fast growth that you've suddenly expanded to, it will take time for everyone to um, acclimatize to that message and making sure we're all going the same direction. And then one more thing that came to mind is in terms of that sales cycle and where branding issues could come in or messaging is also anticipate buyer objections. If you've been in business for some time, especially if you're growing your team, you already know what those are. Those can be
Mm.
already embedded in your messaging before your prospects even ask about them or raise them. And that is very powerful. So when you talk about onboarding new team members in the right way, like
Can you give me
think
an
of the.
example of that? Can you give me an example of an objection being kind of framed within the brand?
It's very abstract. So let's try and narrow that down to maybe an industry or a type of business because this is going to be a little different. What would you say is the most common industry that our listeners are in?
Oh boy, all kinds of stuff. Let's talk about like a home service business, like someone who's doing something at somebody's home.
Okay. Um, it's not something I've particularly hired a lot of, so I'm trying to think. Is it a mat? Okay, let's take this one. Let's think of a landscaping business.
Mhm.
You could have someone that comes in and just says, "Oh yeah, you want this problem solved? It'll be $20 an hour, $50 an hour, whatever the number is." But you're like, "Well, but I'm not the expert. I don't know what needs to be done. Like, how do I know?" So you have not actually given me an answer through that because I need to know I have this problem, how much to solve it. So think of buyer communication. The second level would be, oh yeah, actually I'm seeing this problem. It would be this much to solve it. I've looked around. I'm also noticing some other problems. Have you considered, kind of um, redesigning the exterior space, and we could come in every month and we could do XYZ, make sure it's maintained. So that would be another tier. The power of knowing your customers. So it's not purely an objection, but like understanding their needs and how they think. And then there could be a third level to say, let's say maybe you find out that some of your customers actually, they want to sell their home. So it's not just about solving the one problem or maintaining on a monthly basis. It's that, can you give me more curve appeal? So if you can anticipate different needs, you can tier different, not just message, but different levels of your service to say, actually, not only will we do this on a monthly basis, but we will make sure you, no pun intended, you stand out as the property in the neighborhood and you can get a better listing, right? So understanding these nuances that we take for granted or sometimes we don't pay attention to, and then being able to embed that into your offer, into how the team understands your product or service, that can be so powerful because you ultimately want to be a solution provider, not an executor. Like, sure, you want me to fix this problem? It's $20 an hour. Well, that's not what I
Right.
need. I need the problem solved.
You're talking about the difference between like a customer facing business versus a subcontractor that just executes a job.
And this is one
Really.
of the most underestimated and not talked about secrets of big brands is they spend a lot of time and money in really understanding their customers in depth. And today you can do that. I don't want to sound gimmicky, but you can get so much value from market research with AI in just a few minutes to understand what are their real pain points? What are the unspoken, depending on the complexity of your industry, like fears, desires, goals, hesitations, what permission are they seeking to simplify their life, to in whatever aspect your solution makes their life easier. Getting into your customer's mind is the biggest thing that big brands, they do it all the time. They do it so well, and small business owners unfortunately don't know about enough and the value of what that can do. So whether that's standing out on social media and your ad being really sharp, your message being really sharp, or understanding how to diversify your offer instead of just, oh yeah, guys, when you go out, you just charge $20 an hour and that's it, versus having an informed conversation with, actually, what do you really need? Because here are the things that we can do for you depending on where you're at. And there's hardly a customer that is going to need all three. They're always going to fall into one area. So understanding that upfront, understanding their needs in depth, there is so much untapped potential in there in terms of revenue and growth. I can't even begin to describe it.
Yeah, yeah. There are so many ways to sort of figure out what a market wants. I mean, um, I've seen all kinds of advice out there about how to do this, but with AI, I mean, if given your example of landscaping, if you were going to get into landscaping in a certain city, you could very easily look up all of the different competitors and copy paste all the comments from the reviews into an AI and just ask the AI, what are some of the most common complaints or, feedback or positives and negatives that are being talked about in these reviews, and it'll quickly summarize them all for you and let you know what people are interested in, what they're afraid of, what they complain about, etc. It's never been easier, I think.
And imagine you take the conclusion of all of those reviews and you put that front and center of your messaging of, this is the problem we solve. We don't do landscaping. We solve this problem. And you
Right.
really own it. Like your team can truly deliver on it and you own that service. That is such an easy fix. Like that is something that you could turn around within the week and go and do and stand out and be known as the company that does things differently. And you still provide the same product or service. It's your message and the reason to buy becomes different and based on real people's needs.
Yeah. Um, Noemi, who's the ideal client that you work with? If somebody is thinking about their business and they're thinking they may want to do some work on their brand, who typically are the people that you're looking to work with?
Early stage female founders. So typically the first 5 years of either going from an idea to all the way to I'm trying to take this business off the ground, or if you're looking to buy a business and you notice there are discrepancies in the brand that you want to evolve, these are all areas I can help with in terms of the foundation. So I don't do like what are the best Facebook ad settings. That is not my area. It's really the foundational work of what perception and what image do we want to convey, and how strong and clear is our message.
That's awesome. And where can people reach you?
It's going to be easiest at theconsultingstudio.vip, and I'm also on LinkedIn.
Awesome. I will put a link to that down in the show notes, as well as a link to your LinkedIn profile so that people can find you easily. And I think this has been great. I want to thank you for stopping by and talking with us today.
Thank you for having me, and thank you, everyone. Hope to see you soon.
Yeah. And for everyone out there who's listening to this, watching it, etc., please don't forget to hit the like and leave a comment down below and tell us what you think about the conversation and what particular item you've gleaned from the conversation that you think is valuable. It's great to interact with the content. It shows the algorithm that it's great stuff, and it helps the channel grow. It helps introduce us to new people. So with that, I'll say thank you very much, and we'll see you later. Bye, Nomi.
So, how can you learn more about buying, selling, financing, and managing small and medium sized businesses? Easy. Go over to my blog site, davidcbarnett.com, where you can learn more about me and how I work with my clients. You can learn more about my books and courses that I've prepared for you. You can find out how to subscribe to my email list, the YouTube playlists, and more. There's literally hundreds of hours of content there, all for free, and I'd love for you to be my guest. Special thanks go to Mark Willis at Lake Growth Financial, today's video sponsor. Mark helps people better manage their personal and business finances through the Bank on Yourself insurance strategy. This is something I've done personally, and I've seen others use it successfully for years. Go to newbankingsolution.com to find all the interviews I've done with Mark and learn more about the advantages of these programs. While there, sign up for a free consultation to learn what this solution might look like for you.